Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for attending our webinar today, titled Developing NbS and Biodiversity Business Cases for City Practitioners. Can you move to the next slide? My name is Olga Horn. I'm a senior officer at the ICLE World Secretariat in Bonn, Germany, and I'll be moderating this webinar alongside my colleague Daniela Rizzi, who is the senior officer at the ICLE European Secretariat. And we are joined by NbS experts and city practitioners from Europe, India, and Tanzania, who will present and reflect on the opportunities that different entrepreneurial tools provide for enhancing access to finance for NbS and biodiversity projects. They are Isobel Fletcher from Horizon Nua, Agnieszka Osipiuk from the city of Poznan, Purnamita Dasgupta from the Institute of Economic Growth, Joanna Abi Abdallah from the European Business and Innovation Center Network, Martina Zimpel from the District Council of Harburg in Hamburg, Germany, and Enoch Tumbo from the city of Dar es Salaam, who will provide his reflections. Next slide. So over the course of the next 1.5 hours, we'll cover the following agenda items. I'll start by providing a brief overview of the rationale for using entrepreneurial tools and methodologies for developing these NbS and biodiversity projects, and why these can be especially useful for city practitioners. Isobel and Agnieszka will then guide us through the business model canvas methodology and showcase how it has been used and practiced in the city of Poznan. Next, we'll hear from Purnamita about an NbS investment case that she has worked on for the city of Kochi in India. I will then invite Enoch to the stage to share his reflections and open it up for a wider discussion. After that, Joanna and Martina will present different types of pitches and how they can be leveraged in support of urban nature. Here too, I will then ask Enoch to provide some reflections before opening up to a wider discussion with the audience. And throughout the webinar, we would also like to hear from you, and we've prepared a couple of poll questions for you to answer. But yeah, let's get started. Next slide. So why should local governments use entrepreneurial tools when they develop their NbS and biodiversity projects? And what is really the added value of these type of tools that are used in a private sector context and that local government practitioners are usually less familiar with? So as we know, many local governments, they have limited resources, and this holds particularly true for nature-based solutions and for biodiversity projects. So the entrepreneurial tools that you will hear about today, they can really help to prioritize these scarce resources to really help guide questions on where and how to invest in nature-based solutions. And most importantly, they can help turn scattered ideas into really robust project proposals. They can help in opening up discussions with other city departments, with stakeholders, but also with investors and with such as, for example, development banks. So there's a lot that these entrepreneurial tools can help local governments in achieving. So let's move to the next slide and actually open up the webinar with a little poll. So Daniela, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Olga, and welcome everyone that you are joining this webinar today. I think we want to measure a bit the temperature in the room in terms of if you ever heard about the business model canvas before. So we are launching this poll now, and you can say yes, no, or if you're not sure, so that we can get a picture of the knowledge in the room. So I'm going to give you still a little bit of time, like some seconds still. You have it on your screen. And I guess we can look at the results. Thank you. Okay, so we have 37%, they have heard about the business model canvas. 52%, it's the majority of people joining today, they never heard about the tool before. And if they're not sure, like 11%, they're not sure. So this is actually encouraging. I think, Olga, the webinar today might bring new knowledge to the participants. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Daniela. So let's shed some light on this business model canvas. For this, I'll pass the microphone to Isobel Fletcher. So Isobel Fletcher is the Chief Executive Officer of the not-for-profit organization Horizon NUA. And this organization came out of the Horizon 2020 project Connecting Nature that some of you may be familiar with. So Isobel is a practitioner and advocate in supporting regional authorities and municipalities to devise sustainable finance and business models for nature-based solutions. So she's really has made it a core goal of her work to drive nature-based entrepreneurial strategies to stimulate and support a nature-positive economy. So Isobel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga, and hello, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many representatives of cities and regions from across the globe at this webinar today, and so much interest in developing business cases for nature-based solutions. I want to make the case to you today about using a business model canvas for nature-based solutions to help you make your business case to different stakeholders involved in the design, implementation, and management of nature-based solutions. When we started doing these business model canvas workshops with cities in the Connected Nature project, the initial reaction was, what? But I'm a planner, or I'm an ecologist, I'm an architect. Why do I need to do this? But by the time they had completed the workshop, I think it's fair to say we had most, if not all of them, convinced that it was a worthwhile exercise to do. So let me begin by talking a little bit about the financing of nature-based solutions. In our research in Connecting Nature, we identified three major phases of financing. The financing, the planning of the nature-based solution. So you see there on the left-hand side of the graph, this is the, I suppose, the phase that happens before the implementation phase, and it can actually take quite a long time. There can be quite a lot of resources put into the planning of the nature-based solution. The financing, the capital investment, so you see there in the middle, this is where most of the finance around nature-based solution comes from. And finally, the financing of the ongoing operational costs. But our research has shown that too often there is a focus on financing the capital investment costs of nature-based solutions, and not enough consideration goes into planning the long-term sustainable business model to secure a return on that investment. So next slide, please. So the nature-based solutions business model canvas is actually quite an easy to use tool to help you capture in a visual format the business model of your nature-based solution. But what's a business model? A business model really is just a story. It tells the story of your nature-based solution. It's a term that is used by businesses around the world to explain the different elements of how their enterprise or their business works together to deliver value to a customer, and how enterprises make money from this value proposition. So we adapted it, the original business model canvas, we adapted it to tell the story of a nature-based solution. So the next slide, please. Why would you need to use a business model canvas for nature-based solutions? There are a number of reasons, and really the first one I'm going to talk about is communication. Nature-based solutions can be quite difficult to explain to people who are unfamiliar with the concept, and just by their nature as well, are actually quite complex. So the business model canvas provides a simple way of telling others what you want to do, why you want to do it, who needs to be involved, and how you're going to make it happen. The business model canvas uses language which is widely understood by people from many different backgrounds. When it comes to planning, the canvas is a useful first step for individuals or groups in planning the implementation of the project. It helps everyone involved to consider the basic building blocks required to build a successful, long-term, sustainable project. In terms of identifying new partners, if you consider the value that NbS may offer to different groups of people, the business model canvas can help identify potential new partners or beneficiaries that may be interested in getting involved in the different phases, the planning, the implementation, or the ongoing operation of the nature-based solution. When it comes to identifying new sources of finance, combining reflections on the value the NbS offers with the identification of new partners can help to identify potential sources of initial NbS financing and or partners who could assist with the financing of those ongoing costs or contributing to cost reduction. And finally, as a co-production tool, it is really, a great tool to use between different departments of large organizations and city councils and so on, to reach an understanding of how nature-based solutions can create value for different user groups. It may also be used externally with different groups of stakeholders, but it works best in this situation when an NbS has been clearly identified. So now I'm going to take you through the main elements of the business model canvas. For those of you familiar, and from the poll, I think there's more of you unfamiliar with the business model canvas, but this might look quite similar. And there are some important differences unique to nature-based solutions that we have built into this canvas here. So looking at the value proposition, could you just click on that to highlight it? Thank you. It's really about what the customer or the end user wants. With an NbS, it is really essential to consider the value proposition of the solution, taking into account the recognized co-benefits. So the environmental, the economic, and the social, to consider it from all of those angles. But you have to consider, are there any negative trade-offs? And what do I mean by that? For example, would there be a negative effect on biodiversity, for example, if more people using the NbS, if that led to increased noise or having to put in more street lighting that would affect the habitat for biodiversity? And we will move on then to the value creation and delivery. And by this, I mean, if you look at the left-hand side, we're talking about what and who is needed to create and deliver the value proposition. What activities do you need to create the nature-based solutions? And how are you going to resource those activities? For example, what experts might you need to bring in? What communication strategies are you going to have to put in place? Where are you going to identify the finance that's going to fund those key activities? Moving over to the right-hand side, we use the term beneficiaries here instead of customers, because when people think of NbS, and think of NbS maybe like a park or a green space, they really only consider the direct end users, perhaps the citizens, and that might use the park. And quite often they don't consider the other beneficiaries. For example, businesses nearby could benefit from the proximity of a park, schools and sports club could benefit from the facilities, and the city as a whole could benefit from the environmental benefits provided. Key partners and beneficiaries have been positioned beside each other on this canvas to reflect the overlap that sometimes happens or exists between partners and beneficiaries involved in NbS. For example, the community is often a key beneficiary, but can also be an important partner, as can local business. And finally, then I want to talk about the governance. This is a new element that we've included into the business model canvas, because it really reflects the importance of identifying early on how nature-based solutions will be managed on an operational basis. I mentioned that nature-based solutions can be quite complex with many different partners and beneficiaries involved. So, if we don't consider this early on in the planning process, how the different stakeholders will be engaged in the ongoing management and operations and the governance structures needed to facilitate, it can create, I suppose, headaches maybe later on. So I'm going to end by talking about the value capture. No, you can go back to the previous slide, please. The value capture of the business model canvas. How much is it going to cost to deliver this value proposition and to pay for the product or services that are going to be delivered? So the first thing we need to do is look at the cost structure, identify what the fixed costs are, what the ongoing costs are, and usually they're kind of related to maybe personnel, replacement costs, monitoring costs, community animation costs, and so on. But is there a way you can reduce those costs? Can you look at collaborating with other social service providers? Can you look at introducing things like volunteer programs? Are there changes and improvements in technical know-how that might help you reduce the costs, the operational costs? And finally, the last section is about capturing value. How can you make money from your nature-based solution? But in reality, that's quite a difficult ask and probably difficult to achieve, particularly in the case where the nature-based solution is a public good and is often funded through public funds. But in order to access such funding, it's important to be able to capture value through relevant indicators. For example, indicators to measure air pollution, or indicators that might measure the impact on improved health and well-being. Economic indicators might include things like businesses nearby benefiting from increased footfall to the NbS. So while the business model canvas won't give you a complete picture, it can help shape the story you want to tell and identify the key actions needed to make the project happen. It helps you formulate a plan and a timeline, and it can be revisited as the project progresses. So next slide, please. So I'd just like to thank you very much for your attention. We'll put the links up to the following guidebooks in the chat that you're going to be able to download. Just to note that the guidebook here on the right, the Concept to Delivery Innovation Programme, will be going up on the Go Green Roots website. It's not quite up there yet because we've just finished producing the book, but I'll put the link to the project in the chat. So thanks again for your attention, and back to Olga.
Great, thanks so much, Isobel. I think that was very insightful, getting a very good understanding of the different elements that are included or encompassed by the business model canvas, and how exactly it has been tweaked for an NbS project, because indeed it is different than coming up with a business model for let's say a consumable product. Great, and now I'll actually hand it over to Daniela again, because we'll have another poll question. So Daniela, over to you.
Yes, we want to make sure that our audience is keeping here very focused. So this is a question that it's a bit, it will ask from you a bit more attention. So we would really like to know, after you heard from Isobel Fletcher, the power of the business model canvas for planning and implementing nature-based solutions, how would you see the BMC tool as being useful for your city? So I'm gonna read here some of the points, and if you go with your cursor over the answer, you can read the rest of the answer. So do you think it's important for communication? Do you think it's key for planning, as it can act as an initial step for you to join all the individuals and the groups that are relevant for your NbS and make it long-term? For partner identification, you think it's the added value? Or for financing sources identification, for you to find out who you can count with in terms of financing sources? Or as a co-production tool, so breaking silos in the departments in your city? So please, check out the answers. We're going to give you a little bit more time because these answers are a bit longer to read, so that we can measure here a bit, the entry points of the business model canvas in your city. All right, I see that people are already answering. We'll give it like 15 seconds still, and then we can check the answers. And next, you're going to hear from a city. So it's nice for us to do this poll before the city tells their story. Okay, so we can see the results now. Oh, interesting. So for finding the different financing sources for NbS, so this is the one that got, let's say, the most votes here, 37%. And right behind, we see planning. So using the business model canvas as an initial step to start the planning of nature-based solutions. So this is quite interesting, and I think it's all about identification, right? Reading the context, your local landscape of stakeholders and financing sources. Then as a third one, we have two, a tie between communication, as it can be a method to communicate with different stakeholders, and also as a co-production tool for you to break the silos. Right, thank you for this answer to the poll. And now I'll pass the ball to Olga again, who will present our next speaker.
Great, thanks so much, Daniela. Yeah, so let's actually hear from a city that has used the business model canvas. And for this, I'll pass the mic to Agnieszka Osipiuk. She is the Chief Specialist for Interdisciplinary Projects in the Project Coordination and Urban Regeneration Office of Poznan City Hall in Poland. And she's quite a bit of experience in implementing EU projects, specifically on the focus of nature-based solutions and getting stakeholders involved. So she's spearheaded the Connecting Nature project in Poznan, as well as the Urbex 3 project. And at present, she's working on Invest for Nature, where she works on investments in nature-based solutions by evaluating its benefits and economic performance and market opportunities for it. So Agnieszka, before I I'll ask you to present, how did you actually answer the poll? So where, from your experience working with the BMC, what was the most useful element of it?
Maybe first I would say hello to everybody and thank you, Olga, for invitation and introduction. I chose from the beginning the communication, and I will tell during my story why it was so important. So that was excellent link to my story. So I'm really glad that I can be here today to share experience City Poznan has with the nature-based solutions and with nature-based entrepreneurship. And I will start with a very short introduction of our city. Poznan is located in the western part of Poland in Central Europe. It's one of the oldest and biggest Polish city with over 500,000 residents. It's important center of industry, trade, logistics, business, tourism. It's also academic, scientific, and cultural center. So is it there a place for greenery in Poznan? Yes, Poznan is quite green city where the greenery covers 1/3 of the area, including the quite unique ring and wedge greenery system designed in 30s of the 20th century. However, greenery is not equally distributed, especially in the densely built-up historical center. There is a big pressure, but I think it's in all cities, pressure on greenery from housing, transport, commerce sectors. And moreover, urban resilience today requires implementation of nature-based solutions in a new or improved forms with a special attention to water retention management. And even though Poznan is famous for decades for not in Poland and not only for its entrepreneurial features and high position in investment rankings, still there is no such a good link between planning sustainable investments and planning business cases. So we have to find them. In 2017, we started implementation of Connecting Nature project. Isobel already mentioned it. And it's turned out that there are some tools, there are some approaches to look into the green investment differently than the way to. In that moment, project coordination and urban regeneration office that was responsible for the project was scaling up pilot project on natural playgrounds in kindergartens. And also we were starting new concepts like floating gardens and opening to residents different types of other gardens like family allotment gardens, which are an example of urban farming with a long tradition in Poland. And in the next year, in 2018, a team from Poznan took part in a workshop on planning and capacity building for front-runner cities. And we were introduced there to the new model of business model canvas adapted already to nature-based solutions. And even if capital and operational expenditures were always a part of our investment, the planning of our investments, Building value proposition basing on three phases: planning, delivery, and stewardship, and capturing value with stakeholders contributing to the cost structure was a little bit more complicated. In fact, we needed new data, new indicators, new stakeholder analysis, and first of all, a new awareness of the nature-based solution process within the city hall, and among beneficiaries continue such a program. And here comes the dark horse of the process of NbS planning and implementation. And that was my answer to the poll. Communication. Communication supporting increasing awareness on sustainability, on resilience and climate changes, but also internal communication within the organization. Results of a business model canvas work motivate us to look more carefully to this internal cooperation and communication. As the city of Poznan, in the city, there's about 28 different units that have some tasks connected with the green infrastructure and blue and green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. So in fact, it's already a big group of important stakeholders. And that's also the governance aspect from the business model canvas Isobel mentioned. There was a need to give some space to for exchanging experience, learn from each other, and we did it in the frame of urban local group in health and green space project. As a result, the green plan for Poznan was prepared, and we collected some important information and spread them among the stakeholders. We also elaborated nature-based enterprise strategy to increase awareness of external stakeholders, investors, contractors, as we really appreciate working with small pilot projects, and after its successful evaluation scaled it up, we dedicated strategy from the beginning of it to our one of the flagship project, natural fragrance in the gardens. Strategy aims is to support effective planning, quality of implementation, and maintenance. It includes webinar, high profile events like Connected Nature Enterprise Summit Poznan that was held in 2021, trainings, videos, and written materials. We wanted to be sure that our goals are really understood by contractors, by investors, also the public one. And of course, there are some barriers for working with the business model canvas besides the regular lack of charging capacity. The biggest is the need of this new information I was mentioning before, but also the lack of valuation of ecosystem services delivered by our nature-based solutions, and the lack of business models of cooperation with private sector. Cooperation with private sector was for us the biggest enigma, I would say, for due to different restrictions of private one. In the last year, we started a new project to find solution for mentioning barriers. It's a project Invest for Nature, also from Horizon Europe program, where we are going to go even deeper to nature-based solutions, cost analysis and benefits evaluations. That will support our planning, implementation, and stewardship. We are aiming also in creation the portfolio of models and scenarios of cooperation with private sector as a response to sustainable financing of the city.
But yeah, thank you, Agnieszka, for sharing your insights. So I think very, very relevant and also really interesting how you were able to use the business model canvas, not only for communicating with other stakeholders, but also within the city department, and knowing that obviously a lot of NbS projects touch on various departments. So now we'll actually head from Poland all the way to India, and more specifically to New Delhi, where Purnamita Dasgupta is based. So Purnamita is chair, professor, and head of the Environmental and Resource Economics Unit at the Institute of Economic Growth. And her research focuses on the relationship between economic development and the environment. And as part of the Interact Bio project, she had been tasked with developing an investment case for the city of Kochi, which is situated in the South Indian state of Kerala. Purnamita, we're happy to have you with us and present your work, the work that you conducted. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here to share my thoughts on this work that we did for the city of Kochi, which is a coastal state in the southern part of India. This was a work supported by Clare South Asia, and it had a lot of learning for us, because at the outset, let me state that soon after this work started, the COVID-19 pandemic began. So it led to a lot of modifications that in the study design. And we learned about, how to, in a very dynamic setting, one has to incorporate changes quickly and adapt to it, and adapt along with society in how they sort of respond to a survey, in how they speak to us. And so the design kept evolving. Okay, so that's just by way of introduction. So the objective of the study was to develop an investment case for an intervention for Kochi city that would align the socio-economic development agenda of the city with biodiversity conservation. Now, given that the city was operating like the rest of most parts of India in a fairly with mixed kind of settings, some very low resource contexts and some high income contexts. There's a lot of pressure on land. It is geographically a fairly one of the smaller states, and obviously a lot of pressures that the municipality faces from commercial interests. So the challenge was, how do you showcase and present something for advancing biodiversity, which is aligned with socioeconomic development and is an ask from the community itself, so that the buy-in is better. So what we did was we decided to identify the interventions itself through community engagement with across stakeholders. So in the first part, we drew up and tried to map firstly all stakeholders. And we went to them and said, hey, this is the plan, without giving them too much information, and asked them, tell us, what do you think are feasible conservation interventions for this city that you live in, to different stakeholder groups. And we came up with a list of 22 interventions, from building urban parks to pollution management to, Kochi has this, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. Kochi has a bit of mangroves at one end. It's a coastal city. It has a bit of mangroves at one end. It has traditional farming in little patches in the outskirts of the city. It has kitchen gardens growing within the city. So we had a whole range of options coming up from various stakeholders, depending on also partly on the scale at which they were operating. From a farmer to a mayor, the perspectives could be very different. In the end, what we got was, we got this list of 22. Then we built up some feasibility criteria and indicators. So which ones do you think your community can take leadership on in the transformation process? Ecological indicators, which we asked them, do you think there are economic risks in adopting this intervention that you suggested? So we went back to them again with this whole list of interventions to the same stakeholders, and we said, now rank your intervention in terms of all these criteria. Think through what you suggested. So we had 6 sets of criteria: economic, social, ecological. We gave them certain indicators: operational, technological, and financial, and they came up with different kinds. And obviously, for some of them, we could run through secondary sources of data as well, like the potential area to be impacted if the intervention did take place. And, this is just to show you very quickly the different types of responses we got. And it was very clear that, it was surprising for us that for something like maintaining traditional green areas called sacred groves, they themselves said that the community was struggling to find leadership and interest in maintaining them. So that was a big surprise for us. Whereas we would normally think in the context of any IPLC or ILPC, ILK kind of context, we think it's always win-win. But they said this to us in the context of the city's development, and it was a revelation for us. So we had various kinds of findings as we went on. We realized how important the time period over which the intervention starts giving you benefits, how very important a concern it is in the minds of the stakeholders. So it's not only about, sometimes we say it's only the political stakeholders who have 5-year planning cycles, but you can see that planning cycles and time periods matter variously to various stakeholders, right? So whether it be kitchen gardens or whether it be mangrove restoration. Okay, so I'm not going into the details. We have a lot of detail. I'm happy to share with anybody on a one-on-one basis, but I know there's a time constraint. But at the end of this, we applied standard indices methodologies to aggregate the scores and interpret them. Then we did some principal component analysis on the data on our 87 responses. And we ended up with a listing and prioritization where 2 particular interventions came on top. One was conserving a traditional system of cultivation which is primarily practiced by marginal and small farmers. And the second was the restoration of mangroves. And as you can well imagine, the weightage for these came from very different groups of stakeholders. Okay, so these are just pictures. This is what Pokali cultivation looks like. And right at the borders of the Pokali fields, you have patches of degraded mangroves for conservation. Olga, can I request you to let me know how much time I have left?
You can have a few more minutes, 3 or 4. That works.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So now we came to the next challenge of building the investment case, because the mayor of the city said, no, give me clear cost effectiveness numbers, cost benefit numbers, which tell me that with which I can go to my electorate and say, this is more cost effective than the other. But the moment you start doing that, you don't need to put the numbers in place. You know that something big like mangrove restoration, how would we value it? Because if we value it in terms of the kinds of prices and costs that prevail locally, the value will be very low as compared to the costs of the restoration initiative. We know that. On the other hand, if we do kind of a benefit transfer mechanisms, which, where we impute the value of mangroves from studies that have been done elsewhere in the world in non-COVID times, or we take long-term benefits into account, of course it will pay off. Mangroves are nature-based solutions to a whole host of hydrometeorological hazards, for instance. We know that having mangroves there could become beneficial for farming because of the biodiversity that it supports. But these are difficult things to convince stakeholders who are looking for short cycle benefits and payoffs. And so we thought that, so we actually did the cost benefit of it. And then we found some interesting things. So we then sort of went into more details on these two sort of the traditional cultivation and the mangroves, looked at all the different criteria in more details. And then we applied certain standard economic and financial measures to the data to build our cost benefit story. So we used, of course, we used inputs from stakeholder consultations, cost benefits, financial performance measures, etc., and a bit of multi-criteria decision analysis. And then something interesting starts emerging. What starts emerging is, and I will just wind up in a couple of minutes, Olga, if that is okay. The interesting thing that emerged was that the farmers who were practicing the traditional farming with using traditional cultivars, they were incurring huge economic losses. And they were incurring huge economic losses. They wanted to leave it and move into shrimp farming, which gives them a much higher return. The benefit cost ratio is 7 to 10 times higher benefits if you move into shrimp farming, leaving the traditional rice cultivation where they were actually suffering losses. The government had put in place, but shrimp farming is extremely polluting, and it's hitting other biodiversity services throughout the city. Now, but every farmer wants to shift to shrimp farming. So you see what is the pure investment case would say you do shrimp farming. There's no problem with it. But it is an extremely suboptimal solution if you bring biodiversity conservation into the picture. But and so what does one do? The very idea, because biodiversity is not valued, those values are not captured. It is there in our value system to value biodiversity, but our markets fail to capture it. And as a consequence, what we ended up advocating was, if you want to preserve the traditional cultivation and you want to do the mangroves have to be supported with some amount of public sector funding. You cannot build an investment case for the private investor unless you give specific incentives for it. For traditional cultivars, if you want to preserve them, move them into specialized farms. Don't put them on the farmer. Don't try to do subsidies, which will, just distort the market further. And for shrimp farming, provide very firm regulatory instruments. So what we ended up with was a mixed set of recommendations where we said building an individual investment case would be flawed because the market operates so very differently across these different types of conservation options. I'll stop there. Thank you very much. I hope the presentation wasn't too muddled or had too much information overload. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Purnamita. And I think you're really making the case for, really starting in depth to incorporate those externalities that we often put on the environment, and to really make sure that those benefits are also incorporated and valued at a reasonable price, essentially. So thanks so much for shedding light on the work that you've done. I'll introduce Enoch Tumbo. He's an environmental expert in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Conservation at Dar es Salaam City Council in Tanzania. He's been working with the council for the past 10 years, and amongst others on the development of urban greening guidelines, as well as upgrading of 3 open spaces in Dar es Salaam with the help of NbS. So I've asked him to actually share his reflections now that he's heard from 3 speakers on the business model canvas, how it's been applied in Poznan, and then also on the investment case that showed another methodology of how to engage different types of stakeholders and bring them to the table. So Enoch, I'll give the word to you. Yeah, please share your reflections. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As I have been introduced, I'm Enoch Rumbo from Dar es Salaam City, and I'm here to give you reflection on the three presentation. First, all the presentation gave us an insightful moment for us from Dar es Salaam City. We can buy from it. The first presentation reflection, it was on collaboration and partnership. As currently we really working with we are collaborating with different partners as Hamburg, as we have sistership relationship for upgrading of Botanical Garden, Dar es Salaam City. Also from that, we are working with Dar es Salaam City graduates who are really interested with this kind of nature-based solution. Also, we are working with the NGO known as Tauro. So for the case of partnership and collaboration, it's really reflecting from the case of Dar es Salaam City. On that case also, currently on the upgraded open space, we want to work with the private sector, such as private banks, which are really in need of that space for putting their advertisement. So from that, we are thinking that they can operate the open space by taking care of it, but they can benefit by putting their advertisement. Also, for the case of business model canvas on the area of communication, planning, partner identification, and new sources of finance, from my side, I can say partner identification and new sources of finance can go together, as currently there is a huge need of advertisement space in the city. So we really want to identify different stakeholders as telecommunication companies, banking, and the other people who are in need of space for advertisement. Also, for co-production for that, I'm not sure of it. Also, I could go to the case of Poland experience. Investors, Dar es Salaam City, I can take the issue related to pilot projects. You know, when we started the project, Dar es Salaam Metropolitan Development Project, we were having sort of gleaning inside the project, gleaning alongside the river banks, alongside the roads. But we came into conclusion that we were not having this guideline, such as urban greening guideline, which can guide us on doing such issue related to nature-based solutions. So for that pilot, maybe for the coming project, we are going to add more and more space for greening or for nature-based solution. So for me, as he reflected on be aware, open, and communicate, on the guideline, we really consolidated in those cases by having a communication strategies and having different methodologies that can be used to engage the community. Because after investment, then that open space can be used by or they need to be engaged. Lastly, from the last presentation on the urban green spaces, for Dar es Salaam, we are really interested with urban green spaces upgrading, as we are having a lot of green space which are not upgraded. So with having that pilot, maybe can make us to upgrade more and more green spaces, as the people of the Dar es Salaam city can find the area where they can go and rest. They can exchange ideas, and for this, we are lacking the business case on the upgraded open space. from my side, that are my reflection from today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Enoch. Great to hear, and also about the projects that you're planning in Dar es Salaam and what you'll be focusing on. Great. Now we actually have a few minutes, so we can open it up to the audience in case there are any more questions. We do have a Q&A function enabled, so please feel free to insert your questions there. I think right now we don't have any yet, so otherwise we can also keep them to the end of the session, and then we'll now continue with our next speaker. Perfect. Great. So we'll now move on to the topic of pitches. For this, I would like to give the floor to Joanna Abi Abdallah. Joanna is a project manager at the European Business and Innovation Center Network, where she manages projects related to the circular economy, nature-based solutions, entrepreneurship. And as such, she actually supports the growth of MSMEs and guides them in their transition from the conceptual stage of business plans to the actual creation of successful companies. John, I'm excited to hear from you about pitches, what they are, how they can be useful, and how specifically we can really leverage them to advance urban nature. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. So as Olga said, I'm a project manager at EBN, and before that, I used to work with entrepreneurs, supporting them at different stages in developing their business ideas, business plan, and preparing them to access funding and therefore develop their pitches. Part of Clever Cities, we supported city representatives in formulating their city strategies into business models, business model canvas, and pitches. So we're going to go over different pitching formats, and by the end of the session, I hope you would have a better understanding of what pitching is and how it can help you to determine the type of pitch that you want to develop and what should be included in it. So there are different types of pitches formats available. We'll go over that. But first, the key to a successful pitch is first understanding your audience, tailoring the message to their needs, and also delivering the pitch with confidence and clarity. And this is where communication skills are very important. So different situations call for different approaches. So it's essential to adapt your pitch accordingly. So here you can see the elevator pitch, which it's a term that is very often used because it takes the time it takes to ride an elevator. So it should be very quick to grab attention, usually meaning that you don't have much time. It can be used when presenting your idea or when you're meeting someone in an event. The business pitch, so this is the one for seeking funding, which as per the poll gathered a lot of answers on your interests. Also the investor pitch that is more detailed because it would include more elaborate financial projection and a detailed business plan, but also the sales pitch for product launches, convincing potential clients, potential partners. And you also have a number of others that I will not go into, but there's also the non-profit pitch where you want to convince the donor or supporters to take part in the project, the partnership when we're looking at different partners. And one that is also often used for NbS solution is the crowdfunding pitch, where we want to persuade an online community to financially support a project or an idea. Now we'll go to the key elements of a successful pitch with a clear problem statement, the nature-based solution proposed and its description, the benefit and impact assessment, and the feasibility and implementation plan. And all of this was covered somehow using the business model canvas and how Isobel presented it earlier on. So the clear problem statement, or if you look at the business model canvas, could also be the value proposition or an equivalent of it. So when we develop the problem statement, we should always make sure that it's clear and specific about the problem, that we provide contextual information and context to the problem, that it has measurable aspects or data, and that it highlights the consequences. So here we have an example of how a problem statement can be more clear. It should also be concise and straightforward. Next, when we describe the nature-based solution, we should first have what is the approach, what is the strategy that we propose to adopt, and how the solution aligns with the problem, directly addressing the problem that we want to solve. The benefits and the advantages of how it can contribute to environmental sustainability, social well-being, what is the environmental impact, what are the social and economic benefits, the long-term sustainability, how we want to make sure that it is adapting to changing environmental conditions or the urban dynamics. Also, something that is very important to investors is the scalability or the adaptability to other contexts or locations. Next, I wanted to also talk about the feasibility and implementation. So those slides will be sent to you, and they highlight they highlight they provide a structured approach to, just right before, they provide a structured approach to cover the feasibility and implementation. And it's important because first it starts in a chronological order with the resources that need to be identified, and understanding if there are any lacking elements in those resources and how can we identify them, creating a timeline and the phase. So for NbS solution, it's important for investors or donors to understand how the plan will be implemented. This is very important. So having the detailed timelines, defining the clear milestones and deliverables, identifying the stakeholders and how we plan to engage them through the implementation process, identifying any technical aspects that are required, infrastructure, landscaping, ecosystem restoration. Are there any needs for specialized expertise, regulatory, compliance and permits, environmental impact assessment, risk assessment and mitigation? What are the potential risks that could occur and how do we mitigate them? Budget and funding. What is the budget needed for the initial investment, but also for the maintenance and the sustainability of the solution? How do we plan on funding it through private funding, public funding, philanthropy, crowdfunding, etc.? And then also very important are the measuring metrics and the monitoring plan. Again, the scalability, that is a very big indicator for investors. And the community involvement, we've already considered that, the communication plan, and the sustainability. Next, I wanted to, so the implementation plan is important to demonstrate that you have a clear understanding of the practical steps required to execute the nature-based solution. But also, without being too technical, we also need to look at the power of storytelling. And here we talk about while you are preparing for your pitch, making sure that you include some emotional connections, such as using stories, anecdotes of how it affects people and communities, and illustrating the real life impact of the problem we're addressing, not just using data and numbers. Creating a narrative that takes the audience on a journey, recognizing the problem and envisioning the solutions. Showing success stories is very important, that have made a positive impact in other locations. Using storytelling to describe what the future would look like if the solution is successfully adopted in the community, and keeping it authentic and relatable to the audience. And finally, I have included a few tips to remember. I understand that 50% of you have not heard about the business model canvas before, and so I would assume as well that pitches may be a bit complex to understand at the beginning, but whenever you're pitching or presenting your NbS, I just wanted to point out a few things to remember. First, to be ready for questions, to be ready to handle the questions, but also like anticipate what the common objections would be. So you would prepare your arguments beforehand, using a lot of case studies. So people remember, so example and stories, and make sure to include the research and the sources as well. Also making sure to always end the pitch with a clear call to action. So that would be, if you're looking for investment, it would be the ask how much funding you are looking for in euro terms, or did you want people to join your community? Using visual videos, infographics also to complement the storytelling is highly valuable. Using data and metrics, so always supporting the pitch with data and quantifiable outcomes. And finally, building the communication skills. So including the body language, the tone, the clarity, and I've included practice, and get feedback, so that you can really perfect your pitch. And this is the approach that we have used in several cities, where the city representatives had many opportunities to pitch in front of the audience, collect feedback, and also collect the common objections I've mentioned earlier, so that they would be prepared whenever these questions would get asked. And that's it for me. If you have any questions.
Great, thanks, Joanna. We'll keep all the questions to the end. So thanks so much for elaborating on the pitches, showcasing the different types that are available, that are out there, and again, just pointing out the most important things to remember. If we move to the next slide, we actually have another poll. So I'll hand over again to Daniela. So
yes. Great, thank you, Olga. So we're going to have another poll now, and the question is quite simple this time. If you ever done a pitch for nature-based solutions before, so we would really like to know here from you in the room who has done this, and we're going to wait a bit for your answers so that we can also give to Joanna a little bit of a feedback, Joanna. So that we know the level of knowledge and engagement here in terms of pitches. And please continue to post your questions. We already have 2. We will answer them online still until the end of the webinar. So yeah, I think because it's a simple one with yes or no, maybe we can already flash the results. Oh, interesting. So let's say that 3/3 never did a pitch before, 3/4 and 1/4 did it. So 24%, 76%. So yeah, so I hope that the material that Joanna has presented here can inspire you to prepare a pitch for nature-based solution. And we're also going to hear from more on-the-ground experiences now.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Daniela. Yeah, so let's now hear from someone that has done a pitch for NbS before, namely Martina Zimpel from the city of Hamburg in Germany. Martina is an architect by training with more than 10 years of experience in designing integrated ecological site and culture-specific large-scale urban development plans in new towns in the MENA region. Since 2021, she's been with the Department of Urban and Landscape Planning at the District Council of Harburg, where she's focusing on integrated urban regeneration and, as you heard, also the Clever Cities project that some of you might be familiar with. Martina, over to you.
Thanks, Olga. Thanks for inviting me, and hello, everyone. Yeah, as you already heard, I was part of the Clever Cities project, which for the past 5 years has implemented or tested 20 different small NbS pilot solutions in the district of Harburg. So since we've already heard a lot about the business model canvas and how to pitch, I'm here now to give you an example about how we try to approach that topic. Oops, I'm sorry. In Hamburg. Unfortunately, we actually have to point out that the BMC in the pitching exercise, it only came very late into the project, so it wasn't actually not possible to implement to use it to the projects that we have done and implemented. But we are building on our experience and are going to use it for our future projects and the work that we do within our department. Next slide, please. Because I think the main problem is always, what do you think when you see this? Do you see a tree? Do you see a playground? Or do you see some like vandalized bench? Next slide. Or do you actually think, like, as we urban planners, this is a community, this is a place you want to be? Or do you think as an investor, this is actually a way to make money, or this is an opportunity to invest money? So I think these are the kind of different approaches that give you kind of a difficult entry into designing NbS for profit, as I call it in quotation marks, because as a local authority or a planning department, you don't usually think in terms like that. We usually develop the land as social spaces. We envision how the space is used, how it feels like, what kind of atmosphere or mood should be created. And we want people to feel at home, to feel safe, to meet and interact with each other. So especially, as Isobel also pointed out, public space is for all. And once we try to monetize some parts of public space, we are actually privatizing it. And that's not something that we actually want to do. And within the Clever Cities project, specifically, it was our mandate to combine the ecological and technical aspects with the social cohesion, health and well-being, and citizen security aspects of living in a neighborhood. So that also doesn't scream like entrepreneurial, like money-making kind of aspects in the project. So then we actually came up, we actually tried to understand what are actually the assets that we can offer someone that they want to also invest in our NbS. Because we had to kind of come around to the fact that nature and community and people are actually something that is not only a value or interest to us as a kind of city administration, but it also may be of interest and value to like private companies, to philanthropical foundations, and to the people, so that there is like a common ground that you can work with if you want to create a financial kind of pitch. And also, I think, and then you should be very clear, you should be thinking about at what stage of a project you want to these potential investors to come in, and what kind of buy-in they can expect from participating in the project. Is it they are spending time with it, they're giving money, they are paying with attention, they by kind of publicizing or promoting the project, are they coming in a capex or in the opex stage of a project? Those kind of things I think need to be defined from the beginning, because otherwise you can't actually define your pitch properly. And the other thing that you also need to understand is that the private sector is also working in silos. So it's not only just the local authority that has a department for urban planning, we have a department for implementing the roads, we have a department for the social stuff, for example. It's also the private sector who has specialized on these kind of services. And you cannot put a pitch that kind of covers it all and kind of gets just one kind of partner into implementing and financing the NbS. So coming from this kind of view, we then came up with the pitch, next slide please, which we call More Than Just Green. We want to actually co-create a nature meets people meets art fund. Next slide please. Because what do nature, people, and art and design have in common? We think, next slide please, that they're all part of a future-ready, climate-adapted and happy city, because these are all the things that we want to do. Next, because when people talk about nature-based solutions, mostly what comes to mind is something like this. It's just a patch of lawn that is turned into an insect-friendly flower meadow, or you have something like this, which is kind of an innovative urban drainage solution underneath an existing road, so no one can see it and no one is aware of it, that this is something special actually, and this is something that hasn't been done before. And we actually asked ourselves how, sorry, go back a slide, please. How can NbS help us to not just ecologically adapt to the effects of climate change, but they need to bring an added social and economic value to other cities? Can we combine the technical and ecological with the social aspects of city making, using nature as a starting point? Next. So this is why, like in Clever Cities, our NbS actually look a little bit like this. Together with the people and various experts, we jointly co-created it, which means we didn't just consult or work together in the ideas and design stage, what we normally do, but we made an effort to involve them in the co-production, co-management, and co-maintenance of these solutions as well. So this is why you have a lot of like students building aquaponic systems, urban gardening, or planting things. Next. So and then we also added an artistic element because we wanted to make NbS more visible in the public realm, because urban life is not just about living in harmony with nature or having opportunities for neighborly interaction. It is also about living in a nice environment which inspires people. It should provide orientation and identification, and people should be able to express themselves and have access to information and education about their surrounding. Next. So not surprisingly, the more conventional NbS as shown in the first picture, such as the flower meadow and the stormwater management projects, they are actually getting picked up by various citywide programs, but they have a problem. The flower meadow is mainly geared towards individuals and private plots, while the stormwater projects are mostly not about co-creation, so it's very hard because they require such an expert knowledge. And for the community-focused beautification NbS, there's no program available. So this is why we proposed the following. Next. We wanted to create a nature meets co-creation meets art exchange platform and implementation fund, next, where we want to create an online platform connecting the various NbS required experts. And this is not just the ecological and technical experts, but also those specializing in NbS supporting services, such as the community building, the administration, the funding, the communication and infographic designers, and also people who are willing to invest their time. We also want to use the platform as an NbS ideas board, so people and companies can propose potential NbS pilots for their neighborhoods. Based on these ideas, we then want to create a fund which co-finances the implementation of at least one NbS pilot per year, because we would like to find either part of the co-creation process or an innovative nature-based aspect applied to a standard infrastructure solution or a co-maintenance scheme for the NbS. So this is a co-financing proposal. And moreover, the co-funding should then be applied to devising an income-generating aspect with the NbS, as this not only creates more appreciation of nature in the city, but also if a certain yearly income threshold is exceeded, at least 1% of it needs to be returned to the fund, and thus the fund would be self-sustainable, and it would ensure that other or more innovative co-created NbS with art could be implemented within the neighborhoods of our city. This is all based on the condition exactly that the NbS is designed in such a way that it visually enhances the neighborhood and helps people to appreciate nature, as was done in our reference project. And organization-wise, the platform and fund could be integrated within our administrative city system, which ensures that the chosen projects are in the public interest, which is also very important, and that they can be directly aligned with the wider municipal climate adaptation strategy. Next. So here's the financial ask. We asked for an initial 650,000 to set up the fund, and it would consist mainly of personnel costs for 5 years, about 400,000 euros. We also need 30,000 to set up and operate the online platform for 5 years and organize some accompanying events. And we need 20,000 to set up the fund, especially for the legal side of it. And then we would allow between 15 and 30,000 euros per year for the co-financing of this innovative social NbS. And it could be from multiple donors. Next. Sorry. And why should you invest? There is going to be impact and exposure. Investors get voter rights for which NbS to co-fund, and then they can use them as reference projects for their own brand development. And we also offer a trusted partnership. We are an integrated organization. We preside over the land and have a strong network with ties to the higher ministries. We have ties to academic institutions, housing corporations, foundations, and developers. There's going to be a policy integration because our city actually brands itself as a green and growing city by the water. And we also have a good customer base, as I call it in quotation marks, because we are going to be one of the climate winners. We will have moderate temperatures, which make it able to live in the north of Europe rather than in the south. And we will have a renewable energy surplus, which will boost some new smart industries, which will be coming to our area. This will bring along some more creative, innovating, high-income workers who do not have more disposable money to spend, but they also want to engage in something meaningful and inspiring and want to live somewhere that is meaningful and inspiring. So this is why we say, let's use the momentum. Let us collectively future-proof our cities by combining nature, art, and people to be more than just green. So, yeah, thank you. That's the pitch. So yeah, I think this is actually my last slide. So yeah, it was very hard for us to come up with something that is open, because NbS is a term that is not very well known yet or used in our administration, and we wanted to not focus too much on a specific NbS. So to open the opportunities a bit.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Martina. Great pitch. Sign me up. Unfortunately, I don't have the disposable income for this, but sounds very interesting.
I also want to invest already, Martina.
Nice.
Yeah, you can invest time and you can co-create with us. That's fine. Just come to
Great. Perfect. Thanks so much. Great. Now I'll actually hand over to Enoch again to see if sales pitches, investor pitches, elevator pitches, any of those pitches would also be relevant for the city of Dar es Salaam. Did you get inspired? Is there anything that you took away for your regional context? Please, the floor is yours. Right.
Hello. For the presentation, there are a lot to learn from the city of Hamburg. As for now, we are working with the city expert from Hamburg. We are preparing different material for nature-based solution, and for that, maybe all of the information related to what has been done for the lesson city will be shared to the public. And this, it is development of information and educational materials, integrated nature-based solution, measure types for Dar es Salaam. So with the experience for presentation, I see the community the center of all planning stages. So without community engagement, there is no sustainability. For me, I need to pass through all the presentation, then I'll be having a greater picture for all the presentation. Then I can share with you the deep reflection from Dar es Salaam city or from our side, from East Africa perspective. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I think we actually have a few questions from the audience. So let's turn to those. The first one is actually directed at Isobel. So what role does citizen involvement play in NbS planning and the long-term viability of solutions? What methods have been used to ensure participation throughout the 3 stages of financing? So I guess actually the latter part is definitely aimed at you, and for the other ones, we can obviously also invite the other speakers too.
Yeah, thanks, Olga. Good question. That I mean, I think citizens clearly play a crucial role in the planning and long-term viability of the NbS, particularly when it's a publicly based NbS project, when it's built and delivered on public space. It's very hard to do that without citizen engagement. However, I think experience shows that it is really helpful, I think, to spend the resources and engaging an experienced community engagement facilitator or an animator in this planning phase. And also, I think to manage it, to kind of have your NbS almost selected in advance, and then you're getting ideas for what might happen on the space or how it might be used. I think Martina answered this question very well when she showed the images of the different communities being involved in different aspects of the planning or the implementation and the management. I think things like workshops, pilot projects, seedbed interventions, they're really great ways to test ideas with the community, what works and what doesn't, and what gets community buy-in. I think in relation to the management, yeah, when you have a community-based, nature-based solution, things like community allotments or urban farming projects, I think, you know, it's much, they're much more, I suppose, amenable kind of NbS to involve the community in the management of them. I'm thinking in particular, we have examples from A Coruña in Spain, where they have quite a number of large-scale community allotment projects where they have developed capacity of the community groups around these projects to take on the management of them as the local authority has gradually stepped back. But you know, you do have to invest in building the capacity of these community groups to take on this role, and it's not something that happens overnight. It's a, you know, there's a period of capacity building. Other management kind of tools would involve things like social enterprise models, community interest companies being formed to manage projects like. I'm thinking even things like, you know, community cafes and urban parks, so that the money generated, revenue generated, goes back into, you know, maintaining that social enterprise, keeping it going to deliver on the added value of that public good. So I hope that answers the question to some extent. I'm happy to hear from some of the other panelists if they have anything to add.
Great. Is there anyone else that would respond here? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. This one's also from Devan. So he's asking whether have profitable public spaces ever been fractionalized to provide resources and benefits to the community they serve? And maybe I'll just provide one example and then happy to pass it on to the others. So actually, as part of the Clever Cities project, we're also working with the city of Quito, and there the public was actually hit quite hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. And one thing that the city was doing there was to actually help the residents to formalize their urban agriculture system through the Agropar program that they have, so that the residents could actually sell the produce from the public spaces and sell it to actually generate an income, but then also to actually for their own subsistence. So I think that's one example where public space has actually been used to the benefit of the community. In this case, again, like obviously COVID being one of those big dividing events as well, or happenings that is still kind of having repercussions. But yeah, so anyone else that would like to chip in here that has an example to share?
I think that's a good example, Olga, that you shared. I have one here for Martina. also was posted through the Q&A tool. Sources estimate that around 75 to 91% of the financing of nature-based solution comes from public sources, as we know. And this requires us to make the case for NbS, to urban local authorities and ministries. So what would be, Martina, your recommendations to nudge the existing budgets towards NbS?
Yeah, I think in Germany we were very lucky because we have a green parliament, so we are actually having a lot of money at the moment comes actually for climate and road projects, so we're always trying to combine those. I think the main way to nudge towards investing in NbS is the fact that it's not just an ecological solution. It affects all aspects of human life or city life, because as you can see, we have a social aspect attached to it. We also have maybe an educational aspect. So there are different sources that you can plug into that have existing budgets that maybe they're always looking for projects to invest in and that you can tap on. So I think it's mainly saying what I said, don't look for one donor or one financial partner, but always try to tap into different sources and argument towards those basically, because it relates to all aspects of life. Even the road department, for example, I mean, we are having a huge transformation in terms of how we build our roads nowadays to be more sustainable and restoring the urban water cycle and all these kind of things, sponge city concepts and stuff like that. So, and that combined with more bicycle paths and stuff like that, there's all ways to combine all these things. But I think what I would like to point out at this point is the exercise was specifically to attract private money. And it's very important to maybe point out at this point that neither the public realm nor the public money is enough to mitigate the effects of climate change. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen on private land, and there's a lot of private funding that needs to come in. So I would say don't focus on the public donors too much, to be honest. You need more like programs, incentives, so that private property owners also upgrade their buildings and their properties and make them more resilient as well. So this kind of needs to go hand in hand, actually.
Definitely, Martina. And maybe just one comment from my side. We know that the UK is launching this biodiversity net gain new law, and that might come up, I think, already in January 2024. So land developers are being asked, to make sure that if they're doing a new development, a new project, that they create 10% biodiversity net gain. So I think it's very interesting how regulatory frameworks can push, the public sector, but also the private sector to jump in, because they have to have the skills to provide this type of services and make this work. And so not only in terms of investment, but also in terms of creating the whole market, right, for the ecologists and the landscape architects and that need to have this knowledge to roll out nature-based solutions and biodiversity. Yeah, there's another question. That one, Joanna, I will pose that one to you. So given your extensive experience in assisting entrepreneurs with nature-based solutions pitches, what would you identify as the most crucial initial step for people to prepare their pitch? If you have to choose one thing they have to start with, what would it be?
I guess that it would be probably identifying the problem that they're trying to solve and providing relevant data and figures and associating that with the solution they're trying to propose. I mean, this would really affect the credibility, and all the way to the implementation, the monitoring and evaluation, etc. I guess that would be one. It's a difficult question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. There's another one for Martina, or maybe we can ask it to Agnieszka, like the same question, because we have two cities here. So this one is from Hashmita, and she said, how can one approach neighborhoods for such initiatives without waiting for the engagement? Wait, let me re-elaborate the question. So instead of waiting for the engagement from big institutions and policymakers, how can you as a city approach the neighborhoods and, you know, make these initiatives roll out? Is there something you can do as a city?
Yes, so we can still work on the awareness. As I said, it can concern.
You're very low.
Very
the
low.
sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Try once again. As a city, we can still work with the awareness. I think about the sustainability awareness, the climate changes awareness. So as many information we can deliver to the people to know the processes that will be good for them also to join. But in fact, in Poznan happened something like that people came with the initiatives to change towards the greenery approach. So I think it's also the work of the non-governmental organizations that they were active and they motivated people to maybe fight is a bit too big word, but to try to encourage local authorities to do something with the, I don't know, new areas for parks, new trees, to protect already existing trees or other nature-based solutions. So sometimes it comes from the bottom up, it's already there. But then is the question where we can find money when we don't have as a city hall to deliver the services. And I agree with Martina, then coming to the private sector is necessary for us. And it's also a very big lesson how to do that. It will take some time. We have some failures, we have some success stories, but definitely it should go there. We cannot think only about the municipal money and even the EU money. It will help us in this aspect.
Perfect, thanks. I think maybe just to add to that, so I mean, one of the ideas behind the fund that you wanted to create is actually to have the seed funding for citizens available, no, Martina, where you can actually give money to the residents to put their NbS projects in place. And I think here we've also learned from actually the City of London as part of the Clever Cities project, where they actually did use this type of seed funding. And they've seen that it kind of goes a long way because while it's not that much money for a city, it actually is a lot of money for private citizens and like their initiatives. And because they have this strong buy-in, they really stand behind the idea that they have. It kind of like it really shows how this small type of investment can actually have a big return at the end of the day. And I think that's something where a city can definitely like support these smaller initiatives and really to kind of kickstart also this movement. So I think I do hope that that idea of yours will get funding at some point. So because it does seem quite going a long way. Great. I think unless we have any more questions, seeing that we're already over time, I would like to thank all the panelists and all the speakers for sharing the great work that you've done. And I would just like to have a call actually to everyone that's still on the call. So please join our upcoming webinar. Then there we'll focus on nature-based enterprises and what a city can actually do to create an enabling environment for nature-based enterprises. So really also what we now discussed to really make sure that we can actually foster this and really provide opportunities for them to emerge and to kind of put the pass the ball also to the private sector to make sure that we can implement nature-based solutions. So the webinar will take place on the 6th of December at 1 p.m. CET. So yeah, please join us. Great. Then thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.